I recently came across a book by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman entitled Thinking Fast and Slow. I thought, that sounds simple enough, and I downloaded the book, and it's not simple. The book was very technical and difficult to read, so what I'm going to share with you now is admittedly an oversimplified nutshell, but basically what the book is about is the thought processes we use when we are making decisions. He describes two systems of thought. System one is fast thinking. It happens automatically, intuitively, mostly emotionally, with little effort. It's based on what Kahneman calls Wysiati, W-Y-S-I-A-T-I. Wysiati is an acronym for what you see is all there is. Nothing more. What you see is all there is. And it's a process of decision-making that leads to many poor choices. It's snap decisions made reactively in the heat of the moment, in the fog of strong emotion, under pressure from other people around you, jumping to conclusions based on inexperience, misinformation, limited data, maybe even downright ignorance and impatience. This, he says, is the way most of us make our decisions. But then there's system two. Slow thinking. It includes fast thinking's intuition and emotion, but in addition, slow thinking requires time and patience, information gathering, fact-checking, logical, thoughtful, systematic weighing of possibilities, options, and outcomes. While fast thinking is based on Wysiati, what you see is all there is. Slow thinking knows that never do we see all there is. There's always something more that we can learn. And we should watch out for people who think they see all there is. Slow thinking, he says, leads to much wiser, better decision making. But, as I said, fast thinking is how most of us make our decisions, myself included. I think about a snap decision I made one time about what color to paint a rather large dining room that we had in one of the parsonages we lived in. I didn't have much experience with this. I went to a paint store. I looked at samples for maybe about 30 seconds and right away saw a paint color named August Moon, the same name as our favorite Chinese takeout restaurant. It was a sign. You know, that had to be it. So I bought buckets of this paint. Well, August Moon does have great takeout, but splashed on the walls of your dining room, not. For years, we ate our meals in that blindingly garish, bright orange dining room. How I wish I'd done some slow thinking, taken time, done some research, gathered some samples, asked a few friends, maybe even consulted a designer. You know, that may be not a big deal. It's just the color of paint. But when it comes to our lives, when it comes to decisions about marriage and family, kids, politics, vocation, career, we are advised to employ system two, slow thinking. But people of faith have always known yet another way that is not in this book. A third way. It's a third way of making decisions that employs both fast thinking and slow thinking. It incorporates both, but it is based not on Wysiati, because in this system of thinking, there is the acknowledgement that there's always something more than what we can see or touch or hold in our hands or prove in a laboratory. Always something more than the world, than Wysiati. There's always a realm of mystery, a realm of possibility, the spirit of truth and of divine wisdom, the unseen presence of one who is way smarter than we are, the presence of one who longs to guide us, to lead us, to support us. And this is something that artificial intelligence, AI, will never provide. It's about the soul. It's about the spirit. It's about the realm of possibility inhabited by the Eternal One. And if there is any way in the world to access that kind of presence, that kind of power, wouldn't you want to do it? Well, there is. And for centuries, people of faith have called this third way prayer. This was Jesus' way of making decisions. When you read the Gospels, you discover that he never made a critical decision without taking time for meditation, for prayer, quiet time, silence, communion with the Holy One, slowing down, withdrawing from the crowds, retreating, usually very early in the morning, going to a lonely place, the scriptures call it, or to a garden, or to the wilderness, or to the mountaintop, as in our story for today. He did it before he began his ministry. He did it before he was baptized. He did it before he named his 12 disciples. He did it before he decided to take his message into Galilee. He did it before he decided to go back into Jerusalem. He did it before his Last Supper. He did it in Gethsemane. He even did it from the cross again and again. When making a decision, he turned to God in silence and in prayer. Our story for today is a case in point. When Jesus went to that mountaintop, he was facing a most difficult decision. As I said, by this time, he was in grave danger. He was getting death threats every day. His critics were closing in. They were already plotting his death. If he was to continue his movement, his mission, his message, it would most certainly put him on a collision course with both the religious and political authorities who were headquartered in Jerusalem. He knew that he would press on his way to Jerusalem. He would most certainly be arrested, tried, condemned, maybe even put to death upon a cross. He warned his disciples about it repeatedly. If ever there was a time for him to regroup, to give up, to give in, to turn around, go into hiding, head for the hills, or at least compromise, soften his message, he could perhaps save his own life. If ever there was a time to do it, this would be the time to do it. Surely he wondered, could it possibly God's will that I not die young, that I instead live a long, happy life, get married, have kids, grow old, spend my senior years fishing on weekends or lying in a hammock on some Galilean hillside? Was it really God's will that I carry my controversial message into Jerusalem to confront such hostility? This was the monumental decision he had to make. And he had to know for sure, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that he was on the right track. And this would not be a snap decision. You know, you look at Wise Addy. What you see is all there is, and what he could see was danger. So run for the hills would be the snap decision, the System 1 fast thinking. No, at the very least, this would be a System 2 slow thinking decision. He could not do it in the midst of the hungry, hurting multitudes that were always pressing in on him with their incessant demands. That's why he put everything on pause. He took a big time out, and he went to that mountaintop. Perhaps we can learn from the Master, and we may not have mountaintops here in New Orleans. The best we can do is a levee, but every one of us can go to a mental mountaintop, or to some place deep within ourselves. I think of something that Harry Truman once said. Someone had asked him, how did he deal with all the way the world was just coming unglued around him without going crazy? He said, I have a foxhole in my mind, a foxhole in my mind where I can find refuge when the bullets and bombs are raging. We have that too, whether we know it or not. We can all slow down. And as mindfulness meditation practitioners advise us, practice the pause. Practice the pause. Instead of having a knee-jerk reaction in any situation, making a snap decision, practice the pause. It's a form of prayer, of mindful meditation. And what a difference it might make for us when faced with tough decisions, with a multitude of opinions and emotions swirling around and voices in our head telling us to go here, go there, trying to dictate our decisions, what a difference it might make to slow down, stop, suspend judgment, be still, take a deep breath, sit with it, stay with it, calm your heart, quiet the voices in your head, practice the pause. And in that silence, open our very souls to the presence of something more than Wisey-Addy, something more, someone more. That third way of prayer. That's what happened on that mountaintop for Jesus. Jesus wasn't just asking himself, what do I want to do? He was, moreover, asking himself, what would God have me to do? I think maybe he was also asking, what would Elijah do in this situation? What would Moses do in this situation? Because both of them appeared to him and spoke to him, these two great superheroes of the Hebrew faith, and he wanted to know what they would do at this turning point if they were in his shoes. Let's stop for a minute and just ask ourselves, ask yourself, if you were facing a critical decision, whose wisdom, whose guidance, whose blessing would you seek, dead or alive? Who are your heroes? Maybe a favorite teacher, a professor, a coach, a mentor, a role model. I know it's no secret to you all that my dad was a hero for me. He was not just my dad, he was a mentor, my pastor and my friend. And when he was alive on earth, I often turned to him for counsel. And I was not the only one. Across our conference, across the nation indeed, so many people sought his guidance. They even called him Yoda. You know, the little legendary wise guru in Star Wars. He even kind of looked like Yoda. In fact, on his 90th birthday, we threw a big party for him. We invited over 100 people, and we gave every guest who was at that party a WWJD bracelet, like I gave the kids, because so many of them had often wondered in their ministries, what would John do? And, you know, he died a couple of years ago, but I still ask that question, what would Daddy do if he were in my shoes? And what about our heroes in history, especially in these dark and troubling days in which we are living? Let us be willing to ask, what would Abraham Lincoln do here? What would Franklin Roosevelt do? Dwight Eisenhower? What would Mother Teresa or Gandhi or Einstein, Schweitzer or Churchill? But more than anyone else, Jesus. What would Jesus do? What would he say? He tells us, ask, seek, knock, but then he shows us to be still, silent, and listen. Listen. That's what the disciples heard that voice say to them. Listen to him. You know, we so often think of prayer in terms of words, saying the right words, saying the fancy words, saying lots of words, but there is a very beautiful form of prayer that involves no words at all. It's the form that Jesus often practiced, which is simply listening in silence. The great Thomas Merton once said that silence is God's first language. Listen and hear. A message will come, perhaps not in English, okay, but a message, a prompting, a nudging, a kick in the rear, a sense of direction. A light will shine, a door may open, a new possibility you've never seen before, a sense of rightness, and if you stick with it long enough, a sense of peace. Something like that happened to Jesus on that mountaintop, because when he came down, his face showed it. His disciples could see it. He came down with a sense of crystal clarity, of validation, a confirmation, a sense of peace so strong it radiated from his face. And from that point on, he was able to face whatever waited for him in Jerusalem. He was able to face whatever the future held without fear. So can we. This is God's beloved Son. Listen to him. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.